Welcome to Amazing Veda with Radhe Pfau. Thank you so much, Radhe, for joining us. And your wise words have certainly been like a balm or a solace to several people who are struggling to find their purpose and their path. So, I also wanted to ask you about your, should I say, foray into Ayurveda. And I think you trained with Dr. Vasant Lad, didn't you? I mean, he's
Right.
one of the leading, in fact, some people say the last practitioners of the living masters, one of the last ones who has, mastered the art of the marma, that all of that. So it's another, I suppose, episode altogether. But nonetheless, how did you see Jyotish and Ayurveda? Now, of course, you know that Ayurveda was called the fifth Veda because it extended the Vedic wisdom to the healing arts. So what prompted you also to study, Ayurveda? Is it because you wanted to help people?
It was, as much as I would like to say yes, it was more just a curiosity and an interest, again, going back to how these ancient sciences were once integrated into one. And as I started traveling India and meeting with various Jyotishis in these little back countries and Ayurvedic physicians, I could see the possibilities of these being integrated. And so it was less that I want to be a healer, right? And although Jyotishis are healers in their own way, but more that I want to understand more. What is this Ayurveda all about? How does it differ from Western? And I, when I went back, it was at that time Ayurvedic Institute was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I was living in Philly at the time. So I went back, and I had never met Dr. Lad, although I had seen him on not YouTube, but a couple of videos of him. And I was so amazed, Macron, because I didn't know this. But when I walked in and he would do a consultation live in front of the class every Friday with somebody that's visiting the Panchakarma clinic. And the first thing he would do, he'd put their birth chart up on the board.
Wow.
This is why I came. This is why he's the one that really taught me how to begin to integrate the Ayurvedic consultation and practice with the Jyotish birth chart. And I was in heaven. I was like, oh, how wonderful. Again, didn't go back saying I want to be an Ayurvedic physician. I wanted to go back and understand and see if I could integrate parts of this with the Vedic birth chart. And so, interestingly enough, after graduation, and I went to India, Pune, to do a Gurukula program and graduated, I ended up a year or two later on his board, and I was on the board of the Ayurvedic Institute for 4 or 5 years, and then moved back to Charlotte, 2 hours away. And wouldn't you know it, this is kind of how things work, that a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, the Ayurvedic Institute moved to Asheville, an hour
My,
away, an hour
oh
away.
my.
And we reconnected not only with Dr. Lad, who comes down and does talks at our, I don't think he spoke at the retreat that you were at, but
No,
has
no,
spoken
he did. He did. I met him. Yeah, yeah, I did.
as,
And I
one of
met I
his
met some of his teacher. I met some of his students
team.
also.
Yeah, yeah. So, and he shared, that one of his gurus were Sri Aurobindo, and that his father was a freedom fighter with Sri Aurobindo, and it was this connection I never realized. And we do a lot now with the institute and their team. But if you had been to Shridalu, just did a 4-day meditation retreat after our yoga retreat, and we must have had 10 people from the Ayurvedic Institute who are followers of Sri Aurobindo and the mother come down and participate in both retreats. That's a lot for a little Asheville to have 10 or 12 people, followers. And so there's this kind of, ultimately what's happening is a larger community that's starting to build here between, excuse me, between, Fountain and Greenville and Asheville and even Charlotte. So it kind of leads you down a path that, looking back, you see it different than you did at the time. But I think that's ultimately how the soul was sort of suddenly influencing and directing my life to, once I'm here, to have things starting to come together.
Absolutely.
You can
These
get all similar.
convergences are, I'm quite sure, not at all accidental. And I wanted to pick up on what you said about this whole integration, because ancient knowledge was integrated. It wasn't all divided up. And now Sri Aurobindo and his integral yoga, once again, gives us an opportunity to look at ourselves and the world in this integral fashion. So it seems to me that, the five levels that we all talk about when we, sort of get onto the sunlit path, and none of these levels is to be denied, the physical, the vital, the mental, the psychic, and spiritual. In other words, if we want to evolve, if we want to progress in our own sadhana as individuals, but also together in some form of collective yoga, we have to pay attention to all of that. Whereas some schools in India in the past have tried to deny, or if not deny, lessen the importance of embodiment, life in the physical, or even, the world and its demands and all of that. Whereas I think that Shraband and the mother, they never undermined, all of these so-called contingent circumstances, right? And as Shraband said, all life is yoga. The reason I'm bringing up this is because oftentimes we are at war with ourselves. Forget about being in conflict with the world outside, whether it's our parents when we're growing up, our teachers, or our environment. But we have this ongoing struggle with ourselves. And I think it's once you're on the integral path, you begin to see how everything has a place in our own growth. So my question to you was that isn't it very important for especially people who are starting out to have a slightly more benign or compassionate notion, of what they themselves have been through, rather than clinging to this sense of being victimized, or having had a raw deal, or harboring these resentments for years and years, against people, or being scarred for life by, in a sense, some setback, some injustice. And what I'm trying to say is all of us have been through that. But don't you think that if we want to sort of make progress on this path, it has to start with a certain degree of, I think, self acceptance and compassion towards ourselves?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and something, as you say, everybody struggles with. You know, Sri Aurobindo and the mother both address this, and in slightly different ways. But what Sri Aurobindo says is that, this feeling of guilt, this feeling of being a victim, this feeling of being woe is me, these are negative vibrations that the ego is really putting out there, and it attracts like type energies, and it prevents us from really going within, right? This is a sort of veil or a distortion or an illusion that it's an ego game, right? And so the last we can worry about being a victim or feeling guilty about something we did, the more that clears the pathway to really be able to go within. And this is a big one. I mean, I've gone through it. I'm sure you've gone through it, and others. But when I read that, Sri Aurobindo's, I so saw it. This is the ego at its own game, and we're enabling it. We're allowing it. We're playing into its hands, right? Or other forces that are around and saying, look at, there's an in. Let's get in there and start to play with this person. So I think it comes down to education, and understanding what's really happening and the block that's occurring when we start to get these vital, emotions of guilt and victimization, etc. And until you realize that, you're just at the hands of the ego and the assorted forces.
Exactly. And for example, shame as well, right?
Shame.
And all of these negative emotions, they block the positive energies. And one of the things that once you sort of get in touch with the Veda, you begin to see that everything is a balance, as it were. Ushas, the dawn goddesses, are in a way complemented by Ratri, which is also a goddess, the goddess of the night.
Sure.
And you have Surya, or Savitur, and then there is Soma, the moon. So there is Agni, and there is Soma. So and there is Indra, the aspiring will and force of the intellect, and then there are the Ashwinis. So what we see is a world which is not hostile to us, but these are our own capacities, and then we begin to feel empowered. We begin to accept ourselves, and we think that uh, you know uh, the best of us. We start having faith in the divine, which is already within us. And then the psychic being comes to the fore, and we reach a stage where in a sense we are no longer afraid, because we feel that even if there is some sort of setback, or there is whatever a temporary lapse, even that is meant for our own say upliftment ultimately, or our education. So I just wanted to ask you about Vedic astrology. What I was told is that the entire tradition is not to scare you, not to, as it were, tell you, you're going to face this, there'll be this reversal, you've got your Rahukal, but actually it's about Upaya. The entire tradition is about finding not so much solutions, but ways of dealing with the challenges that each one of us is going to face.
Yeah, I think it's lost a lot of that tradition, if you will, because at least I've traveled quite a bit in India. I've had so numerous readings here and there, just to observe and see, and it becomes more, when are you going to die? When are you going to get married? Are you going to be able to buy that house? People are transaction oriented, and that's what they come to you for. Which, after a while, I realized that's okay. If that's why they're coming, we can answer those questions, but let's also open some other doors for them so they can see behind it. Why have I had 5 marriages? Why can't I seem to do well at school? Why do I keep losing my job? Or what are my gifts in life, right? Where am I supposed to, what's my path in life? So one of the things I wanted to mention, Makrant, is to come back to the secret of the Veda, and to come back really to the Rig Veda. Because what eventually got me back into the Rig Veda is exactly what you were just saying. All these beautiful gods and goddesses, right? The Ashwins, Rusha, Aditi, all our sun gods, the Rudras, the Vasus. Oh my gosh. And as I was studying Jyotish, the most fascinating thing to me was the Nakshatra system, right? It's a lunar system. And so it's based less on Rashis or constellations that we think of in Western, and more on Nakshatras, which are the subset of stars that the moon passes through every 24 hours, right? It kind of hops from one constellation to another. In fact, one of the ancient names of the moon is Shashan, rabbit, hopping rabbit. And these nakshatras, very little had been written about them, even in India. They all relied on the Puranas, nice, but there was not a lot of depth. And as I started to look, each one is ruled by a godhead, right? And so what do? We have Aditi, we have Agni, we have the Apahats, we have Bhagat, we have all the sun gods. And I'm going, not all of these are in the Puranas. Where are they? Because I wanted to be able to research and understand their powers and their potential. What is it telling us about a birth chart when the moon is in Ashwin, right? So this is what led me back to take all those books off, and those 10 mandalas off my shelf, and to start reading and reading at a whole different level than I had 30 years before. And I found every single godhead of the nakshatras that rule the nakshatras, not only in the Rig Veda, but as you know, the Rig Veda speaks periodically about 33 godheads, right? 30 and 3, 3 times 11, 33. There's got to be some correlation to the 20, there's only 27 nakshatras. So through about 2 or 3 years of research, not only was I able to profile each of these nakshatra godheads as their original psychology and perspective and powers and personalities in the Rig Veda, but a larger question was answered, which is why? Why these 27 nakshatras? There's 33 million gods. How is it that they picked 27 of these? And I was able to tie the 27 to the 33, which we won't go through, but it was a pretty easy exercise because there's collective godheads in one or two. But more importantly, if you go to the Aitare Brahmana and then the Vishnu Purana, what you find is that these nakshatra godheads, which are in fact the 33 in the Rig Veda, are the ruling godheads of the current Manvantara, the Vaisvasva Manvantara, that have come in to kind of lay the path for humanity in this huge, 4 million, 4.3 million span of time. And so I thought, well, how amazing is this? Jyotish, and in the Vedas, the Rig Veda, you'll see mention of 2 or 3 nakshatras. It was known at the time, right? It wasn't the focus of the Rig Veda, but it was known. And all those godheads took their place in the sky with their powers and potentialities. And I used to even do a reading only on nakshatras based on the godheads, illuminating some of their gifts, some of their ways forwards. It was a way of not only introducing the Rig Veda and the godheads, but also maybe opening up slight, small doors, a little bit of the windows to them. And it was quite a journey for 2 or 3 years. It was a time when I had literally lost everything. Well, I had my cat and my parents, but it gave me that loss. Boom! I just went right into the Rig Veda, into the Brahmanas, Yajurveda, Artaveda, you name it. I went into it with the perspective of trying to understand first and foremost these nakshatra godheads, and ended up, as you know, writing this book on the divine forces of the lunar nakshatras. So it was a beautiful and wonderful and immense opportunity that if I had been engaged in the outer world, if I hadn't gone through that loss, I would never have had that growth and that experience. So there was something very magical happening during that period, and connected to that first book, Secret of the Veda, Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, and tying in the Jyotish that Sri Aurobindo introduced me to. It was just, how do you even begin to explain that? So,
in fact, we should do a separate series on your book because I think there is something so valuable in it. But when we talk about these 33 koti, the koti word, some people say it's a crore, that is 10 million. But actually, what I've understood is it's 33. Koti also means, levels or, degrees of Godhead. So it's not a number that is 33 into 10 million, that's 330 million, really, but there are 33 levels of Godheads. And these levels of Godheads, in a sense, are, in my view, can be mapped, if one wanted to do it, from the physical, right to the supramental, because they pervade the entire cosmos. So I'm saying what the Veda does, if one goes to it, is it gives you the assurance and the experience, in a sense, the palpable, the visceral experience, that energy or that force that we consider the divine has permeated or is, in fact, itself manifesting in all these different forms and shapes, and is inside us also in every single movement of our breath, of our every single heartbeat, every cellular impulse. So actually, there's nothing in us that is non-divine or can be considered fallen in an absolute sense. And even that touch of inconscience is a part of that divine plan, in a way, for the, as it were, reassertion of its own nature, which, no matter how far it goes from itself, remains itself. So I don't know if I'm speaking in a somewhat of a conundrum, but
no, it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I would just add to that, and I know we're out of time here, but I would just add to that
no, we have lots of time. Go ahead, yeah.
I just also believe that every one of those divine levels of, I call them godheads, every one of those godheads has its operation, has its consciousness on various levels, not just the physical, not just the vital or the mental or the spiritual. That you can take Usha, and if somebody is operating primarily on the physical level, well, you can explain to them and understand how Usha manifests in the physical. If they're more of mental, or let's just say Jupiter is in Ashwini, how is it operating in their life on the mental level, and etc. So they're all operating simultaneously at the same time, exclusive of the other or exclusive of any plane. It's how we reach them, how we approach them, how we, I shouldn't be doing this, I should be doing this, right? How we connect with them internally, and where we are on our path and what we're open to. So it's beautiful. I mean, I see the love in your voice too. It's just so beautiful what the Rig Veda has brought, what your Bindu and the Mother has brought, and how we can learn about ourselves and grow if we just are a little bit curious, right? Just a little seeking, just a little bit. It's just, I'm in awe. I'm just in awe all the time. And you've just brought that out again and listening to you. So thank you so much for that.
And I want to pick up on, before we close, on just a couple of things you said. First of all, love. And to me, the mother represents that power of love. It's a power of love that is irresistible. So no matter what kind of mental blocks you may have, whatever you've gone through, when you come in contact with that kind of love, it just opens your heart out, and it's so spontaneous, as it were. Uh, so that power of love, and then Sri Aurobindo, like the power of light. I mean, his own Gayatri, Om Tat Savitur Varam Rupam Jyotihi Parasya Dhimahi Yanna Satyena Deepayet. Yeah, no, that Prachodayat comes in the old Gayatri, but Sri Aurobindo, that I just wanted to bring it up because Jyotihi Parasya Dhimahi. So that is Sri Aurobindo's Gayatri, Jyotish. That Jyotihi, it's a part of Sri Aurobindo's Gayatri Mantra. I just wanted to, it just struck me. So what Sri Aurobindo is saying is he's invoking the power of that light, that higher light of consciousness, uh, which then helps to manifest the power of truth. And that is the supramental power, right? So I'm just saying the mother represents love in a manner of speaking. Of course, she represents many other things. And Sri Aurobindo represents that power of light, the Jyotihi Parasya Dhimahi, which is like that Jyotish. That's what I was trying to say,
That's
which
where
is
you were
right
going.
there in the that's what I was trying to say. Anyhow, on that note, I'm sure that we'll have occasion to invite you another time for a discussion, maybe on your book. And thank you so much, Radhe, for being with us and the wonderful work you're doing. We would also like to do a program on La Grace itself soon. And viewers, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel and send in your comments. Let us know what you think about our conversation today. And if you're curious about perhaps some aspect of what we talked about, especially Vedic astrology. With those words, thank you, Radhe. Thanks so much
Thank
for
you.
everything you said. And it certainly has been a treat for me. And I'm sure it'll be a delight to all our listeners. With those words, namaste. Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you, Makrant, and thank you for all the wonderful work that you're doing through this podcast and reaching so many other people and the wisdom of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother to them. So thank you so much.